And now I bring to you Ron and Nancy Anderson, everyone.
Time with Shannon. Fabulous, fabulous.
Where'd
Let me
you
walk
go?
around this way. Here I am, right here. Wow, what a lovely group tonight. Thank you all for coming. Good looking house. Man, oh man.
Hello, everyone.
This is my lovely wife, Nancy.
Hi, Nicole.
Well, he likes you.
His wife likes me.
Yeah, I'm Ron Anderson. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. Our topic tonight is creating a peaceful marriage. So we're going to look at ways to resolve conflict. How many of you have had conflict in your marriage? Hey, an honest group. I like that. And what we do is if we can get rid of some of this conflict and learn how to resolve it, we're going to have peace in absence of all of that conflict. Remember, we're going to have peace in absence of the conflict. So pay attention. We got some good things today. Nancy and I used to have a lot of conflicts. Am I right? We fought all the time. And I'm telling you, it was horrible. We would fight at the drop of a dime. And our friends were embarrassed sometimes to be with us because we would fight in public.
I'm not denying any of it.
But when we figured out that we were doing it all wrong and we drew ourselves close to Christ and we started learning what the biblical teachings were on how to have a good marriage, how to have a peaceful marriage. And that's what we started studying. And if you get rid of that conflict, the peace is going to grow, and that's what happened to us. One of our worst conflicts was on a romantic, oh man, it was fantastic, romantic getaway to Hawaii. Oh, wow. Can you pick a better place to have a romantic getaway? So we got in the biggest fight of our lives in public. It was a public event, and we're like screaming and yelling at people. No, at each other. We're yelling at each other.
Yeah.
It was awful. Our good friends who were with us at the time, they walked away. They were so embarrassed. And we got so loud and so angry at each other, some of the people started selling tickets. But
awful.
what we found is that event spoiled the next 2 days of our so-called romantic holiday. It was horrible. We didn't talk for 2 days after that. So we had to learn how to get rid of this conflict. You know what it was over? Tell them what it was over. Do you want to tell them?
It's supposed to be later. He's skipping ahead. I am a rule follower person. He's way in page 10 already. All right, I'll tell him the story.
Okay, tell them the story, babe.
Okay, so we're in Hawaii. We're at this beautiful resort. You know how lush it is and everything. Well, I lost our camera.
Lost the camera. 3 days worth of shots. Gone. Poof.
So this is way before cell phones. I was in my 20s. Can you imagine how annoying I was in my 20s?
Yes.
So I
No, I
lost.
couldn't imagine how annoying you were.
I'm better than I used to be. So I lost the camera, and he was upset, rightfully so. But the conflict came in, not really about the camera, because he said, I had just come out of the ladies' room, and he said, go back and look in the ladies' room. Well, I knew I had lost it before I went to the ladies' room, because I knew I went in without it. But he requested that I go back and check.
Would it kill her to go in and check?
Apparently it would, because I said, I'm sure it's not in there. I'll go look somewhere else. I'm not going back in there. So he's telling me to go check, and I'm telling him I'm sure it's not in there.
Louder
and it gets
and louder and louder.
Now, what I should have done,
Yes, tell them what you should have done. I want to hear this.
I should, even though I knew it wasn't there, I should have gone in and pretended to look.
What? Pretend? No.
Pretended to look, stood there for a second, gone out, like are you happy now? No, that's not what I should have done. I should have gone in, looked around, come back and said, no, it's not there, let's go to Lost and Found, which is where we found it.
Yes. They found it in the ladies' room that she was
No,
in.
they didn't. No, they did not. But it was
I think she's not telling me the whole
it
story.
was my stubbornness
Yes, it was.
and his stubbornness.
Yes, mine.
Neither of us would let go. Have you heard that phrase, the dog with the bone? You've played with the dog. They will not let
It was
go.
the dog with the camera. So here's some of the ways that you're not going to be able to resolve conflict. Are you ready? A lot of these I've done. These will not resolve conflict. Name calling.
The silent treatment,
Door slamming.
jumping out of a moving car,
Comparing your wife to an old girlfriend.
pushing him out of a moving car,
Intimidating her.
insulting him,
and using logic to get your point through to her.
and using only feelings.
Oh, how about keeping score? I used to keep score.
That's bad.
A lot of guys just keep score in their head. I actually had a chart.
Oh, yeah? Well,
What?
I have a chart. In fact, I have several pages of charts.
And that's about at least how many offenses that I did over the last 40 years of marriage. I'm telling you, it was horrible. Another thing is throwing tantrums, like we did at the Hawaiian village.
Yes.
Those techniques will not work, I promise you. What works is biblical methods for resolving conflict. If it's done correctly and consistently, that's it, correctly and consistently, it will lead to a state of oneness in the relationship. And that's what we're striving for. And then you'll have peace in your home. But you have to do it consistently, right? You can't just do it 1 week and then just be a jerk for the next 6 months. It won't work.
No.
There's a verse in the Bible, Genesis 2:24. Therefore shall a man leave his father and his mother and shall cleave unto his wife, and they shall be one flesh. And that's what we want to become. And if we have peace in the relationship, that's what's going to happen. The Lord's telling us what to do. All we have to do is do it. If we really believe that verse, we should not want to fight with our mate, right? If we want to become one, we got to say, fighting with my spouse is not going to work. I got to figure out how to resolve these differences in a peaceful manner. And that's when you create oneness. And a lot of this material, there's a weekend retreat, couples retreat that we're involved in for years. Some of this material is from that. Great stuff. So it really makes sense. The verses are here to support what we're saying. Our marriage is pretty much peaceful now. But believe me, we had terrible trouble. As a matter of fact, for those, you want to tell them a little bit about our story for those who don't know it?
Well, it's basically what the book is about, and that was many years ago.
Yes.
38 years ago, actually. I left my husband for a coworker, and we thought our marriage was dead. I had moved out. But the great news is
Yes.
that God restored my heart to the Lord. The Lord and I got straight, and I came home and begged Ron for forgiveness, and he forgave me.
Only through Christ. Only through Christ.
So our story is that no marriage is beyond repair, that there is always hope, especially if you will surrender your will to the Lord's will, and then you can rebuild on that.
You think you've had a bad day? Wait till your wife walks in the front door and says, I'm in love with another man and I want a divorce. That's a bad day. And that happened 38 years ago, but Christ had other plans. And he saved our marriage and he brought us back together. We got closer to Christ because we had drifted away. That was our first problem.
Yeah.
We recommitted ourselves to the Lord and to our church and got involved and started studying the Word and building from there. And as I'm listening to those songs, it just blows me away. I was thinking back to the apartment we were living in, and I was sitting there thinking, we're doing this 38 years later because of God's mercy and God's blessing of bringing us back together. So the credit goes to him. So the Hawaiian trip was horrible. We slammed the doors. Tell them a little bit about where our hearts are.
Okay, the Lord knows our hearts, and he knows there will be conflicts in our marriage because we're humans, right? So he already knew that there was going to be conflicts. Some of the things that bother most couples, differences in personalities. He's an extrovert and an optimist, which is really annoying to me because I'm the opposite, and I'm sure I'm annoying to him. But we've worked it out all these years. So opposites in personalities, family backgrounds, you can't get any more opposite than our family background.
No.
I mean, I was raised in the Leave It to Beaver home, and he was raised in the Twilight Zone.
Yes.
My baby brother's here, for the users that don't know, Daniel.
Hi, Dan.
He was
Nice to
such a
see-
good little boy.
What?
Now he's a man.
6'3".
Anyway, we had a great home life, and Ron's was more difficult. So that caused conflicts in our life, too,
And
our
I
married life.
And I think when you come together, you have to look at those things. Why does your mate do a certain thing? Maybe that's because of the way she was raised. Like in my household, my father was screaming and name-calling all the time. And early in our relationship, I thought that's what a marriage looked like. So I called Nancy names, and I yelled at her and screamed and would slam doors and all of that. But that's what I thought relationships were. But the Lord said, no, time out here. That's not how the relationship is going to work. So we regrouped and started over.
Right.
James 4:1 and 2 says, where do wars and fights come from among you? Do they not come from your desires for pleasure that war in your members? You lust and you do not have, you murder and covet and you cannot obtain it. You fight in war, yet you do not have because you do not ask. You know, we are so selfish, right?
Yes.
Why don't you share that with them about the in-laws?
Conflict is common in most marriages because we're different people and we have different things. Usually in these areas, one of the most likely to cause trouble is finances, and we recommend the Dave Ramsey course if any of you have taken that, Financial Peace University, Living a Debt-Free Life.
How many of you have taken that course?
Get on that.
They do that here. Peter and his wife still do it. It's phenomenal. I mean, we've sent people
It will solve a lot of conflict.
It changed their financial lives. It really will.
Right. So that's one option. Children, how to raise them, how to discipline them, intimacy issues, in-law issues, household duties. We have talked to people who their biggest fight is about how to load a dishwasher. Because one grew up in a household where it's like, you know, a military parade, everything is like totally lined up, and then one is just whatever fits, and if you can shut the door, that's good. So marriages get heated with, it seems silly from the outside, but to them it's a big deal. So household chores, who does what, when, and how to spend free time. Hobbies can sometimes be a source of conflict. But we're all selfish, and that's what it comes down to.
That's really where it boils down. If you take all of it, it's usually because we're not getting what we want at any given time.
Right.
And then we react. And the Lord doesn't want you to be selfish. This is the most important person in my life, and I should be willing to sacrifice my desires and my needs to please her, and that's what I try to learn to do. I'm not perfect at it, don't get me wrong.
And vice versa.
Peace is shattered and conflict comes in when one or both of the spouses don't get what they want. The result usually is anger. When we didn't get our way, conflict began. Now here's some of the things that anger can erupt when you feel in the relationship that your rights are violated. That's a reason for anger to erupt. Another one is expectations are not met. And that was a big one in our relationship because I didn't know what her expectations were that I was supposed to meet. So consequently, when I didn't meet them, she was unhappy, and then it made my life unhappy, and then we had chaos, unmet expectations. So one way to resolve that is tell each other what you expect out of the relationship, what your needs are, and then give the person an opportunity to meet those needs. So don't let that little trick get your mind going. Another way that anger comes up is when you feel like you've been hurt. So when I called Nancy a horrible name back 37 years ago, that made you angry. And then she would react to that, and then I would react to that, and now we're fighting till 3 o'clock in the morning. So nothing gets solved. So anger can be helpful or harmful. Anger can be an emotion used to resolve conflict. When you see that there's something bothering you, it's like, okay, something's bugging me, I'm getting upset. There's something that needs to be resolved. And now you talk about it. You be open and you be honest about what it is, and then you resolve it in a peaceful way. And that also brings you closer together. When you go through a trial together, whatever it is, it's like when we split up and we went through that trial, that, oddly enough, it made our marriage stronger because it gave us a purpose to refocus. We kind of tell young couples that you don't know what it is, but the enemy is out there laying landmines in your path. You don't know when you're going to step on one. You don't know what it's going to be. But we guarantee you, you're going to step on that landmine. Nobody gets out of this deal without any scars. But if you keep Christ with you, when you hit that landmine, you're going to get through it. He's going to help you through it. There's going to be another landmine down the road. You're going to be a little bit stronger. So when you hit that next landmine, there's still going to be some scars and tough issues, but the Lord is going to help you through it. So don't think that this is not going to be a trouble-free experience here on earth. Anger must be controlled, though. Very important. Some people use anger as a weapon. You can use anger to shut down the other spouse so you get your way. And that's not fair, because whatever it is you're angry about, give your wife an opportunity or give your husband an opportunity to help resolve the problem that you're dealing with, that emotional gut reaction you're having to something. Uncontrolled anger results in the following: bitterness, resentment, isolation, conflict with God, violence, and fear. So that's kind of the things that we're in. We had drifted away from the Lord, and I know she felt isolated in the household because of the way I treated her. There was resentment, and all of that stuff resulted in us almost splitting up. Remember, hot heads and cold hearts don't resolve anything. I'm going to repeat it again. Hot heads and cold hearts do not resolve anything. If you take the word anger and you put D in front of it, it spells danger. And that's why you got to be careful. When you start feeling those temperatures rising, Elvis used to sing a song about that, I think. When you start feeling those temperatures rise, you got to be really careful. And that's when you got to say, hey, I need a couple of minutes alone, or I'm starting to get really angry. Can we just chill out a minute and let me tell you what I'm angry about and not argue about it? Tell them some other areas.
Okay, here's some last minute things that may trigger. You've heard that phrase. He knows how to push my buttons, or she knows how to push my buttons. Well, here's some of the buttons that people typically push. Last minute changes. If one of you likes everything in order, that would be me. And then the other one, who's a little more fun.
Stuff is everywhere. That's me.
Changes of plans. That can be a problem. Feeling neglected. Feeling shut out from the other person's life. Feeling disrespected. This is more common for men because they do have a need to be respected, but men can certainly disrespect their wives as well. But when you feel disrespected, you pull away from the relationship. Work stress, if you bring that home. Unrealistic expectations. Do you know that, girls, I have a secret for you. Your husband cannot read your mind. I know we think he can read our minds. Now, Tanya can read my mind. There are women that can read she'll go, I know what you're thinking, and she does. But he rarely says, I know what you're thinking.
I never know what she's thinking. But that would cause conflict because she would have an expectation of me doing something I didn't even know it existed. I didn't even know it was on the radar screen.
Right. So, unrealistic expectations and hurtful words. Because sometimes it can be the guy, but generally it is the woman who nags. Because we want to get our point across 35 times until he understands. But you know what we look like? We look like this. And we sound like ba 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 ba. That's all he sees. He is not hearing a word you say.
Tuning out. I'm tuning out. I don't know about you guys, but I bet some of you tune out also.
And that's not pretty. So we have to be careful with our words and the amount of words, because we can overwhelm them with words and then they shut down and it's not effective. It's not getting us where we really want to go.
Our brains are smaller.
No.
Not really. I'm kidding.
Feeling our rights have been violated. Think of it this way. Say you have a lot of little unresolved conflicts. They may not be big ones, but there's a lot of them. So you take all these little stones and you're not dealing with them. You're pretending they're gone, or you're just like, well, I'll get over it, but you really don't. And you pile up all these stones until one day, one tiny little thing, but it goes on this pile. And then the whole pile falls and you're in a war. And you go, what happened? How did that one little thing start a big battle? Well, that's because there's all these unresolved things that have been piling up and not dealt with. So that's what our emphasis is tonight, is to deal with those things. We did that. So that's why small infractions will cause us to go ballistic, and we can't understand why.
And that's, you husbands, you drop these little pebbles on your wife that's causing pain in her heart, and you think it's resolved and it's not. And then, like she says, then one little thing happens and it breaks up into World War III. The Bible tells us we must become one. The only way we are going to resolve conflict is if we both are committed to oneness and peace. One of the things when we got back together, we were on an agenda. Our first agenda was follow Christ, put Him first, and learn everything that we could about how to have a good marriage. And not only learn it, but start applying it. And slowly but surely, it took about 3 years before we started liking each other again. Just because we got back together, she was still in love with the other guy. But we had made a conscious decision that we were going to work on it. And for about 3 years, we put all of our energy into that. And I'm telling you, after about 3 years, the Lord blessed it, we were swinging on the same swing.
Well, I waited for my decision had nothing to do with my feelings. I made a decision, and eventually my feelings caught up to that decision. So you can decide to love your spouse, to follow the Lord, to do the right thing, whether you feel like it or not. Because sometimes we don't. Sometimes it's much easier to take that path of least resistance.
Believe it or not, I am not always lovable.
Pretty much. Much better. We're both much better than we were.
But what men think is if the wife is not... This is a trap, guys. This is a trap.
What's a trap?
This is a trap.
Marriage?
No. When the wives are not talking about it, it must have got fixed. I'm a genius. No, it's bubbling below the surface. It didn't get fixed. We're naive. We think just because we're not fighting about it, that whatever it was got resolved.
She must have forgot.
And that's those little pebbles that are adding up. So don't fall into that. If you don't ask if you're in an issue, are you good with this? Are we resolved? Okay. Make sure she's happy. And then Romans 12:18. If it is possible, as much as depends on you, live peaceably with all men and women. That's your wife and that's your husband.
That's our key verse. As much as it depends on you. Sometimes you have to be the bigger person, even if the other one is behaving in a way that's selfish or bad. You know what your responsibilities are, and we have to rise above our
And don't
feelings.
you think sometimes emotionally one or the other is stronger sometimes than the other?
Yeah, we
So
kind
you
of
got to
take
rise
turns.
to the occasion. When the other spouse needs you, if she's having a rough time, you got to step up, vice versa.
Okay, so if you have a thing that needs to be resolved, say I'm the one that's offended by whatever it was. For example, we'll use that Ron called, when we were early on in our marriage, he called me horrible names, profane names. So let's say that is an example. He doesn't do that anymore, but let's use that as an example. Say he did that and it hurt my feelings, and I can't seem to get over it. So first of all, the first step is admit that it hurt, because sometimes you're just going to bury it. But admit that it hurt and be willing to talk about it, and don't be a martyr, because that can happen too. Oh, you always treat me like that, and I guess I'm used to your abuse, or I'm used to your meanness to me, and I don't even care anymore. Is that effective in solving the problem? It's not. So we have to be careful of that. Many people respond to a hurt by denying it. Well, that's not effective. So the first step is admit that we're hurt and want to restore that peace. And the cop-out that a lot of women have, and I've done this, is he'll say, "What's wrong, honey?" And I'll go, "I'm fine." Don't you understand what fine is? I'm fine. Okay, now what's he supposed to do with
We've all
that?
heard that as husbands, and they're not fine.
I'm not fine, but I don't want to talk about it. I should say I am very upset, but I'm too upset to talk about it right now, so can we talk about it later? That would be the honest response,
Right.
and not the reverse response that's not effective. So what do we do next?
Well, what we want to read is Proverbs 19:11. Good sense makes one slow to anger, and it is to his glory to overlook an offense. We've learned over the years, everything doesn't have to be an argument. Everything doesn't have to be a battle. Sometimes you let stuff go, and you just have to do that. Nancy and I will look over the situation. Is it really a big deal? Now, let's go out to eat and forget about it. If it is a big deal, it's a real issue, then talk about it. But sometimes I'll say something stupid, and it's a big offense, and sometimes I'll say something stupid, and she just chalks it up to who I am, and we go out to dinner. I married him. I guess that's what I get. Be sensitive, though, about the issues that are really important. Like she said, talk about it. Don't bury it, because if you keep burying it, you're going to feel like she would start feeling like I don't respect what she's thinking or what she's feeling. And then she's going to feel distant from me. And then we're not going to have oneness. So talk about it in a humane way. If we each have to consider our contribution to the conflict. This is where you have to be honest, guys and ladies. If you're the problem, admit that you're the problem. If you slipped and made a mistake, say, you know, you're right. That was my fault. I'm sorry. The other night, I was real short with Nancy. I got impatient with her. She was working on something, and I had one last roll of whiteout left. And she said,
Show me your whiteout.
You think I brought it?
Yeah.
She says, can I borrow your whiteout?
I saw that he brought the whiteout.
I said, yeah. And she does this. And I got really, I said, what are you doing? It's like, I reacted to her
I didn't
like,
know how they work. I like the kind with the brush. That was new technology to me.
I admit it.
He got so mad.
I got so upset and impatient with her. And I felt so bad the rest of the night. And all the way to work the next morning, I'm saying, what am I, an idiot? It's a 30-cent piece of stuff. And I broke down the piece in the house for this. Here, do it. Yeah, baby. Who's your daddy?
He wouldn't be mad if I wrecked the car, but he was mad over that. So.
But it's weird how I overreacted to something so stupid. So I got to address my role in the situation. What patterns or habits do I have in the relationship that contribute to the conflict in the marriage? Like, I had to stop calling Nancy names. I did that. I had to stop yelling at her. I did that. I had to stop making wisecracks at her expense in front of other people. Those are some of the things that I had to learn. But in your marriage, it might be procrastination. Whatever your habits are that drive the other person nuts, write them down and talk about them and work it out. If we're not there 5 minutes early to an event, Nancy says we're late. That's the way her dad taught her. Impatient, like I was impatient the other night. I had to apologize and say, hey, I overreacted. It's just whiteout. Harsh words are a snippy attitude. Sometimes you get that little snippy curve in there that's
And
cutting.
we girls can be really, you know, the eye roll. Have you ever done that? You don't say anything, you just go, the sigh and the eye roll. That can be communicating like a passive-aggressive attitude.
Right.
And that's not healthy either.
No. And sometimes I would make a wisecrack at Nancy's expense, and on the way home I would hear about it. And my response was, don't be so sensitive, I was just joking. We were up till 3 o'clock in the morning fighting over that. Because she is more sensitive, because that's why God made her that way. That's why she's a great wife and a great mother and a nurturing person. She's the one that's going to wipe the drool off my face when I'm 90 years old. None of you guys will be there, I guarantee it. So God made her that way. That's why we're attracted to a woman, because of that sensitive nature. So if I rip that sensitivity out of her heart, it's like marrying one of you guys in 30 years. What happened to that? What happened here? She's not nice or soft anymore. So I had to learn not to make jokes at her expense. But I still did it once in a while, but we were working on it. And I learned that if I did it and she caught me on it or said something, I wouldn't say, don't be so sensitive. I'd say, I'm sorry, please forgive me. And she would give me mercy, because she knew I was trying to change a bad habit. So that's a key, is if you have a spouse that's trying to change in a bad habit, don't beat them up on it if they slip back once in a while. Because change takes a long time in your personality. We were at a couples retreat several years ago, and the pastor said something from the pulpit. I'm telling you, every man's head in the room spun around. He says, you know, I realize that when my wife is telling me to stop yelling at her, she's not always talking about volume, she's talking about attitude. Oh, I see women looking at their husbands. At the next morning breakfast, we had 8 people that we talked about that, and all the guys says, man, I had no idea. And all the wives says, yeah, it's true. And one of the wives says, when you raise your eyebrows at me, I feel like you're yelling at me. That's not his intent, but that's what she sees. So when you're in that thing, instead of yelling and then saying, well, you think I'm yelling, I'll show you yelling, and you end up fighting for 4 hours over where you're yelling or not yelling.
If he's aggressive at all or raises his voice a little bit, it might feel like yelling. Anytime you feel like you want to back up a little bit, that's probably
to
a
the
clue.
other room?
Yeah, that's probably a clue. Okay, before you confront, check your heart. Remember, your spouse is not your enemy. And I want to do a little exercise. I want you to turn to your mate, and if you're alone, just say it to
You're
yourself.
not going to have to say anything loud. Just
just
turn and look
where
your
you
wife
are.
and husband in the eye and repeat after us.
Okay. Now, the husbands are going to say it first. No, you say it together. You look each other in the eye, and you say, "You are not my enemy." Go ahead. Then you keep looking at each other's eyes, and you say, "You are my friend."
Amen.
Sometimes that
home.
little bit of connection.
But sometimes you do
You
feel,
are my
I
friend.
can remember early on, I would have to, of course, my behavior didn't show that I was her friend, but I could remember back saying, "Hey, I'm not your enemy, I'm your friend." Now, if she was smart, she is smart.
Hey,
Delete that from the video. If she
Thanks,
would have,
John.
if she would have thought about it, she would have said, "Well, you say you're my friend, but you call me these horrible names. You don't treat me right. What's the friendship in that?" That would have been the conversation to have, because I was saying I was her friend, but I wasn't treating her like a friend.
okay, so you have to examine your motives. Are you trying to retaliate when you confront someone? Say that we'll use that example. He called me a name that is not acceptable, especially if he did it in front of our son. So I want to talk to him about it. Am I doing it to retaliate or to restore peace? Restoring peace is always the right motive. Am I doing it to punish him, or am I doing it to restore peace? Lovingly confront, approach it carefully. Check your circumstance, your surroundings, not near children, friends, family, in-laws especially, and never confront someone while standing near a cliff.
And when it comes to retaliating, I'm going to warn you guys, if you come home and you find your wife watching a lot of episodes of Forensic Files, and she's taking notes, you better clean up your act. You don't want that retaliation.
There's a lot of bad things going on in the forensic files. So, check your circumstances. The right place is at home in private. If you need to make an appointment time, say you're getting the kids to bed and dinner, whatever, you say, "You know what, I want to talk to you. Let's get the kids to bed and we'll talk around at 8 o'clock. Is that okay?" So make an appointment if you need to. The right place is at home in private. The wrong place is in a park in Hawaii. Wrong place. Don't spoil a happy day. If you're having a great day and everybody's singing and whistling, that's not the time to have your discussion. You wait. Maybe the next day, maybe later that day. Then when you do confront, you focus on one issue. I'll use a different issue. Say you're going through your credit card bills and your husband has told you that he's got a really good deal on a used bike and it costs $100. That's what he said. Well, you get the bill, and it's much, much more than the $100 than he told you. So this is upsetting to you. Now, you're not sure if he lied, if the credit card is in error. That's possible. Something happened between what he said and the bills coming. So you need to talk to him about it. But when you do that, you just focus on that issue. Look, I got the credit card bill, and you told me the bike was $100, but this says $500. Can you tell me what happened? Rather than saying, "You are such a liar, and you always lie to be about money, and I can't believe you're deceiving me." Now, is that going to get him to tell you and to open up to you? No. So you confront him about one issue and the behavior. You don't call him a liar. You just say, "I'm really concerned, and this was troubling me." Very specific. You're not going to talk about every money issue you've ever had. Just going to talk about the bicycle and that credit card bill.
And you talk about that. We have a tendency to deflect that and bring something up that person.
Well, your Nordstrom bill.
Right.
Sorry. It's a Nordstrom worker.
And now you're arguing about that, and then from there you go to another tangent, and by 2 in the morning you forgot where the argument started.
The point is, you told me one number and it's a different number. So just stick to what the concern is. And don't say always and never.
Yes.
We've done this. I'll say you always leave your wet towels on the floor.
And I say that's why God made floors.
No, he says in 1978, I picked up a towel once. So it's not always.
But it's true. I don't know if any of you have ever had that experience where you're talking about something and that word ever or always or never is dropped, and man, there's your bait to get out of it. Now now you're fighting about the word never or always instead of resolving the conflict. So
Right.
don't do that.
He forgot my birthday one year, so I said, "You always forget my birthday." Well, he didn't always forget my birthday. It would have been much better, and we wouldn't have had a fight if I said, "Yesterday was my birthday, and you forgot, and I'm really hurt."
Or if I would have remembered it.
So that would have been, that would have been the best solution if he had remembered it. So putting that other person, making them wrong and making them the bad guy does not solve the problem. We
Doesn't
have
work.
5 minutes.
We have 5 minutes. I thought it was 8:38 that we're done.
I don't
Well-
know. What time you want us to end? 8:30?
What'd she say? Oh, okay. We're gonna bring up some of the good fights. We got video back here. We're gonna go to 4 in the
This
morning.
table's full of stuff you didn't
Okay,
even know.
Galatians 6:1, brothers, if anyone is caught in a transgression, you who are spiritual should restore him or her in a spiritual and gentle way. So do that. If you make a mistake, work together on it. Resolve it in a nice spiritual way. Pray about it. That's another thing. If you have a conflict, maybe before you get into dissolving or resolving the conflict, you pray about it first. Lord, give me wisdom on what to say and what not to say, vice versa. But I have made mistakes. Sometimes I make a mistake and I hurt her really bad. And I know I'll give you guys a tip on how to get out of that kind of a jam. First, you got to find out what your wife's love language is, one of her love languages. Nancy's love language is Snickers. So I buy her a Snickers bar when I make a big mistake.
Oh,
Is that it? She loves it. Sometimes sometimes I really blow it and I have to give her one of these. Yeah. I save that for the big guns and I really blow it. Resolving conflict requires a process for the one who committed the offense. Admit to the Lord first that you did this, okay? He knows you did it, but it's good to confront him and say, hey, Lord, I really blew this. And also admit to yourself specifically what you did wrong. That way you know what the issue is. Take responsibility for the consequences. If I said something that hurts her feelings, I'm not going to try to rob her of that pain. I'm going to understand, hey, I created the consequences. Now I've got to deal with them and not say, oh, get over it, let it go, and all that stuff. That just makes it worse. So understand taking the consequences. I must ask my wife to forgive me and ask myself why I did it. What motivated me to hurt my spouse? Maybe you had a bad day at work, or maybe there were a lot of those pebbles building up and it finally exploded. What sinful habits or patterns do I have that I need to address? Humbly ask her for forgiveness. Seeking forgiveness is not the following, everybody, a way to get off the hot seat. That's not fair. That's not why you ask for forgiveness. It's not a quick fix for the damage that I caused. It's also not so we focus on me. Don't turn it around on me as, you shouldn't be so sensitive. I was just joking. See how I turned that offense around?
somehow
No.
it's my fault.
Now it's her fault. How does that make her feel? Not very good. Don't say, I only said that because you provoked me.
Ooh.
I'm a bad husband because you're a bad wife.
And I'm a bad wife because you're a bad husband.
You don't want to get in that cycle. Here's some ways of seeking forgiveness. Have an attitude of humility. The same thing when we go to the Lord and ask Him to forgive us, I hope you're not arrogant and boastful about it. When we go to the Lord, we're humbling ourselves before Him because He has the power to forgive us. Same thing. When you go to your spouse and ask forgiveness, be humble. Have a commitment to change, okay? Repent of the offenses and stop the bad behavior. Just like my bad habit of making jokes at her expense. I had to stop doing that. So you got to change the behavior. It's not just good enough to say, hey, forgive me for this. I'm sorry. She forgives you. And the next morning you're doing the same dumb thing again. There's no point to that. So you have to change your behavior. And it's also an act of obedience to God by asking forgiveness. When you're asking forgiveness, be willing to admit, I'm wrong, I was wrong, I shouldn't have called you a name. speak specifically what you did that was wrong. Then this person knows, okay, he's getting what my beef is. It's not vague. So
I lied about the money on the bicycle. Back
lied
to the
about
other
the money
example.
on the bike. Willing to say, I'm sorry I called you a name, and I'm sorry that it hurt your feelings. Address the reaction. Be willing to repent. I know that I hurt you deeply, and I don't want to hurt you again. Please forgive me. And be willing to ask for forgiveness. Will you forgive me for calling you a name? Ask for forgiveness for that specific thing. So you're both on the same page. Because a lot of times wives think husbands discount their emotions and don't really listen to what they're saying when you've hurt their feelings. Trust is not automatically there. You have to rebuild trust. It's just like when Nancy left me for this guy and we got back together. There was a trust issue there, obviously.
Obviously.
And whether I'm calling her a name or we're cheating with the finances, whatever it is, if you've been offended, you may not trust the offender. So you got to give the person who was offended a little time to see that you're back on the right track and you build that trust. So be patient and ask the Lord to give you patience as your spouse is rebuilding that trust in the relationship. Trust isn't automatically. Trust is rebuilt through consistent behavior over a period of time. Consistent behavior over a period of time. Your spouse's hurt does not automatically disappear. There's going to be some pain there. It's like if you cut your hand and you have the doctor deal with it, it's still going to hurt for a few days. Eventually, it's slowly, if you do everything right, that wound heals, the pain goes away. Same thing with her. Ask God to give you patience in dealing with her healing. And remember, forgiveness, if you do this, will lead to peace, don't you think?
That's the goal. That's what we're talking about, is that oneness, that peace that could be in your home. So that's the person who's asking, who's been the offender, and they're asking. Now the other one is the one who is choosing to forgive. Notice I said choosing to forgive. Forgiveness is a choice that you can make to forgive the other person.
How would you like it if you did something, you sinned, and you went to the Lord and said, Lord, please forgive me. And you heard this big voice say, let me think about it a few days. That would be awful. The Lord doesn't treat us like that. So don't treat your spouses like that.
So
Forgive.
True forgiveness is not, many people have misconceptions. Forgiveness is not pretending that something did not happen. You will remember it. That whole forgive and forget, you may or may not be able to forget, or it may take a period of time to forget, but you don't forget 30 seconds after. It doesn't work that way. We're humans. It's not conditional. You can't take it back. And it's not forgetting. The trust is in a separate column from forgiveness. Like when we got back together, after we'd been separated, he forgave me, and that was a gift, an undeserved gift. But the trust I had to earn. So I quit my job. I never saw that man again. I did everything I could. I told him when I would be home. I was consistent with my behavior over a long period of time until he said, you don't have to be accountable to me for every minute. But I had rebuilt enough trust with him, if you think it of money in the bank, that he said, I'm beginning to trust you again because I was trustworthy. So that might take a little time. It's a common mistake to tell your spouse to get over it. Well, think of the example. If you really wounded your spouse, there's a wound there. Have you ever had a wound and then it's like you're in public, you like, don't touch my arm, it still hurts. So you're oversensitive in that area, which is normal to protect that part of you that has been wounded. So that takes time, and there may be scars. True forgiveness involves help from the Lord, number one, a choice to cancel the debt.
He's canceling our debts.
Yes. An attitude of letting go of resentment and vengeance, and no more punishing, and an act of obedience to God. This works for small hurts, and it works for big ones, like adultery or any other kind of
And finances
abuse.
or just attitudes or meanness or anger.
Yeah,
All of it.
any of the big stuff and all of the little stuff. The pattern is the same. So all these things will help you resolve your conflicts and restore the peace in your marriage. And that's what we want. Don't we want peace in our marriage? Don't we want it to mostly be pretty darn good? We're doing pretty good. And when we have flare-ups, we deal with them quickly. We take them to the Lord. We take them to each other in a proper way, and we clean it up. And we go back to restoring the peace. So what's the last verse?
Well, remember, we're sinners. We're going to make mistakes. Be quick to give mercy and forgiveness as the Lord does with us. That's really powerful, very powerful. Remember that. And we tell young couples, study the Word, stay close to Christ, and follow the principles of the Bible as it relates to your marriage and some of the things we were talking tonight. And, we just celebrated our 40th anniversary, and I'm telling you, that's a miracle. And if you do that, at the end of the race, you'll say, wow, it's been a good run. Been a good run, babe. 1 Peter 3:10 tells us to seek peace and pursue it. And that's what we did tonight. We learned little techniques on how to seek peace, and now go out there in your daily walk and pursue it in your household. And I guarantee you, the Lord is going to bless you. If you do it, He will honor it. Yeah. And you will wake up in 40 years and say, man, it's been a great run. That concludes our presentation tonight. Lord bless all of you. Thank you so much for coming.
I think Jeff's going to come up.
Jeff's going to come up for a minute.
This has been a presentation of Refuge Calvary Chapel, Huntington Beach. For more information about our ministry, please visit refugefamily.com or call 714-891-9495.
Set free.